everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Health Mondays, where we talk about mental health issues on Mondays. So, for this series, for now, we will be talking more on autistic topics. As some of you might know from my last video, I actually was diagnosed with autism when I was 18. And by autism, I actually mean a very specific type, which is Asperger's. So, today we'll be talking about the gustatory sense, which is also known as the sense of taste. So, we actually hear very often about people on the spectrum who have hypersensitivity to certain issues. For example, you have these physical stimuli where it's like whether something's too loud or too bright or just too many people, all this kind of stuff. The sense of taste, therefore, is no exception to this. Here's the really weird thing about that. So, I, as a person, feel like I'm a super taster in the sense that I can taste a lot of things that people might not kind of figure out. So if you're, like not that I'm a wine taster or anything, but if you actually cook something, let's say with chili, which has a whole bunch of ingredients in there, I feel like I'm much more able to pick out the specific components of each dish better than the average person, which is not necessarily a good or bad thing. It kind of makes me feel a lot like when you were a kid and let's say you hated like the taste of broccoli or kale or whatever vegetable was actually popular at the time. Kids don't like that because it tastes weird. To me, it always tasted like kind of like irony and like irony at meaning like there's a lot of like it tastes metallic, or it's the sensation like it's too crunchy or it's too like moist or all this kind of stuff. It's not until I was an actual adult where I actually began to eat cruciferous vegetables or kind of like dark leafy greens more readily, because I've kind of like gone over that initial like weird feeling. Um, so it happens a lot with vegetables in children because that's just like a common trope. A lot of kids don't like eating vegetables. I think there are studies that show that like the most common vegetable that kids actually like eating are actually potatoes in the form of french fries, which isn't exactly the most green or nutritious of vegetables. That being said, what I do nowadays is that even though I can eat stuff like kale and broccoli, it has to be prepared in a very certain way. Like, I don't really like kale salads or broccoli salads because, again, it still has that weird taste, but instead of just being metallic, it's now even like muddy, which I know that, if you wash, you can eat vegetables raw, most of them at least. Anyway, here's an example. If we have guacamole, which traditionally comes with avocado and a whole bunch of other stuff like onions, raw onions actually, raw onions, tomato, cilantro. Some people put garlic powder, some people put like chili powder, a whole bunch of other stuff in there. I absolutely hate the taste of raw tomatoes, onions, or cilantro. Literally having any of these, one of these three ingredients on their own will quite literally induce nausea and quite possibly vomiting from me. Um, I don't know what it is about it. The tomatoes taste too. I don't want to say it's acidic or sour, but there's just weird, like, very like mushy taste to it. I could do tomato soups. I can do ketchup. I can do pretty much anything that's tomato. That's not the actual fruit itself, fruit or vegetable itself, on its own and raw. So I know there's like a certain type of Mediterranean inspired dish where it's basically just you chop up a tomato and you throw I believe slices of goat cheese in between them. It's like a cold appetizer dish. I will absolutely not eat that. Same thing for onions. I could do onion soup. I could use onion seasoning. I can cook onions in anything as long as it's kind of like cooked down so it's not just like very crunchy and raw. But I can still do them fully raw when it comes to guacamole or tacos. And that's because when you have all these flavors mixing together, it kind of adds like another property on top of the individual parts. It's like this whole biological concept of, again, where the sum of its parts is more than, each individual piece. It's the same thing. Another example is mangoes, which again, I can eat anything that's actually mango based. So mango slushies, mango lassi, mango yogurt, mango, like dried mangoes are actually my favorite dried fruit, mango ice cream. And if it's actual mango, I will literally throw up. I've unfortunately actually had this happen to me before. Um, Again, zero logical sense. If you think about it, I guess the only comparison is that mangoes and tomatoes are both mushy, therefore it's the same kind of like mouth feel. But that doesn't really explain why, for example, I like, I don't know, like soggy croutons or something, or like something that's actually chewy and mushy. I know a lot of people who have the opposite reaction where they have a too little of a sense of taste, where it's more like they're hypoactive when it comes to their sense of taste. So these people might actually end up adding more salt, adding more sugar, adding way more kind of flavorings and condiments than someone typically needs to reach this threshold that tells you, okay, it's too sweet or too salty or whatever it is. So for me, I have the opposite, where basically I'm so sensitive to food. I'm not even a vegan. There are times where I literally cannot eat meat because it tastes like blood. This is like well done steak. It's not even like rare or raw steak. And I still feel like it tastes like, it basically tastes like if you had butter and you melted it somehow and you mixed it with blood, which is a very graphic description, but that's exactly how it feels like to me. And this is a steak dish that doesn't even have butter in it, but it has this like oozy, like weird, gross feeling to it. Um, what I've been trying to do recently is to cook more and to add more kind of things that I would otherwise not get nutrition from. So I made chili, for example, this last weekend. And chili comes with, you know, your meats. If you're not a vegetarian, I think you use another like tofu or soy product if you are for the protein source. Or you can just use beans. And what people usually put into this is like chili, like actual bell peppers and chili powder and all this stuff. I actually added some red wine into it as well as some cocoa powder, which actually turned out really well. Um, but I would never eat bell peppers ever. Like that's not even one of those things where you can cook it down and make it like soggy and soft and like tender. I can't do that. I can do that with like tomatoes and onions. I can't do that with bell peppers. So for chili, you literally just cook the crap out of all these bell peppers. You throw everything into the mix. It's a very nutritious meal because it has all of your, you know, it has your proteins from your beans and your meats. It has all of your veggie and fiber stuff from, again, the vegetables are in there. It gives you a very good source of, you know, fat along with everything else because of the foods that you're putting in there. Very healthy dish. Also, just an absolute terror if you were to like completely, if someone ever served me chili and they gave me just the individual components and made me do it myself, I will be asking to speak with the manager. It's bad. Um, so this is kind of a ramble again, as usual, but I hope it kind of gives you more of an idea of what someone on the spectrum might feel about foods. The kind of closing statement I have is if someone's very picky as an eater and that kind of goes into their adulthood, this seems to be a spectrum based thing. Some people, when I was working in the autism lab, we worked with children in special education classrooms. It was a big achievement for them to even have chicken nuggets, which are very bland tasting for the most part, right? It's really just salty and you don't really taste the meat. And the reason why was because either it was too crunchy or there was like an extra layer. And in this case, it was even more like it was a color preference. Like it literally was too, like it wasn't purely white or yellow or anything. It has like different layers to it. So there are a lot of like kind of idiosyncratic ways that people on the spectrum might approach food. And it's never really like, oh, I hate the way you're cooking or you suck. Like it's nothing like that at all. It's more just like the things that most neurotypical people take for granted are not obviously inherently acceptable to people on the spectrum. So the next time someone's being like a fussy eater or anything like that, just kind of think about whether or not this person actually might have. It doesn't have to be a spectrum thing. It could be people who just have hypersensitive tastes. These people will be really good at working as a chef, for example, right? Because you're able to tease apart different things that most people will not be able to, and that's not necessarily like a good or bad thing. So in closing, I will do yet another topic, hopefully next week on a Monday, talking more about autistic topics. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please make sure to subscribe, and you can also click to some of the other links I'll post. Um, I will show you guys certain studies probably done on this topic, as well as other topics within the playlist of autistic topics. Said topics like 10 times. Bye.